We have a quorum. We have we reviewed and approved the minutes with one minor change from gold to golf cart. And we're now in the agenda where we are discussing the letter from the Friends of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail outlining common rules, and to discuss the process for seeking approval from the select board via the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee. And as I started to say, just by way of background, and as we all recall, there was a multi-town meeting held, and during that multi-town meeting, the proposed updates and changes to universal uniform rules were discussed. There were other topics discussed, but that was really the fundamental and foundational at our last meeting. We had not yet received those, although we discussed them. And when that meeting, the multi-town meeting ended, it ended with the request that each of the town's rail trail groups, in our case, the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee, take it back to whoever we take these things back to, and see if we can gain assent on these universal uniform rules. And so that will be the job of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee. But in our role as the safety subcommittee, we are sort of the first pass, if you will, since this is right in lockstep with why we're getting together. And so the first thing that we thought we would do is discuss comments about these universal uniform rules, and then talk about providing that feedback to the full advisory committee. So let me open it up to the two of you. I may have some comments, and we'll open it up to the public.
Deborah, would you like me to share the document on the screen?
Oh, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. And you see that, Dorcas and Mary Beth?
Yes, I can see it.
Yep.
Great. And it says if you pinch it, it will get bigger. So as we can see, the universal uniform rules are yield to pedestrians, keep right past left, give audible signal when passing, do not block trail. And then below that, you have 4 additional rules: wear helmets, leash pet, remove waste, no littering, carrying out, respect property adjacent to the trail. And then there were 3 ideas that were discussed. One was to have one sign with all 8 rules posted, along with a QR code for further information. We'll talk about the QR code because we talked about that last time. I have one sign in which the first 4 rules are posted in big font, and then the last 4 are under that. And then the third option was to have 2 different signs, one with the top 4 rules posted frequently at certain intervals, and then another sign with all 8 rules, perhaps at trailheads, kiosks, and parking lots, more information. And then there was the agreement that the communities, once these rules are adopted, would obviously all have similar rules across the different towns. At our last meeting, some important topics were discussed. One topic was that not everybody travels with a mobile phone. So having a QR code is going to be helpful for some and not helpful for others. I think that point is duly noted, and there can be multiple ways of providing additional information, such as a website that people can go to. They can write that down on if they're carrying a pencil with them, etc. I'll make one more comment, and then I want to open it up to the two of you in the public. I think what the committee wanted to focus on is making sure that from a universal safety perspective, that these signs are visible, they're consistent, and they're simple. And they focus on accountability as opposed to any particular mode of transportation. And the recognition that when you have more rules, it could have the unintended consequence of having people just ignore them. I know for me, when I'm riding or walking or in any way traveling on a rail trail, I tend to, my eyes gravitate to things that are big and easy to see. I struggle when it's smaller, and it makes me a little bit anxiety producing. So that's just my own personal opinion. And so what we have before us, as I said at the beginning, is to discuss these proposed rules and what we would like to bring forward to the full Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee, just with respect to the multi-town. And then we can get into our other topic today, which is our principles. So with that, let me turn it over to Mary Beth and Dorcas.
I think that having the sign with 8 or more items I never would read through that. One sign with 8 or more items, and there's no way. So I think that you probably need a sign with maybe 4 items and then a sign a little later with the others. But I think that all 8 are important.
Okay.
I favor the idea of having the first 4 ones being in very bold print and larger. I don't object to all 8 of them being on the same sign, as long as those other 4 are in a smaller font and don't detract the eye away from the 4, the 4 kind of more important ones. However, I don't feel really that strongly about it. If they were to be on 2 different signs, that would be okay with me. But I do think that 8 is too many, like Dorcas said, it's just not readable. So I favor the idea of the 4 important ones being emphasized.
Deborah, one of the members of the public have raised their hand, Barbara Pike.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, for some reason on my mobile device, I don't know why I can't see the participants. So thank you so much. Barbara?
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can, thank you.
I had a question about what exactly additional information the QR code was going to convey. And the second question is, what is your opinion about the icons that are on the current signs? And I've got a copy of the sign. I don't think I can share it, but what it has now is that I'm using my hands and you can't see anything, but the rules are listed, and then there are some icons across the top, the things that are allowed, and some icons across the bottom with the big red line through it. And I just wondered what your opinion is, but I'm particularly interested in knowing what the QR code information would be conveyed.
Thank you for your questions. I'll respond. And then I'll note that there could be other comments from the public. So the first question, what would be on a QR code? Again, this is something that our safety subcommittee is going to talk about. But on a Bruce Freeman rail trail that is used in multi-towns, the QR code could lead to the whatever the existing website is for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, whoever manages that. And Marcia, you can remind me if there is, and maybe it's you, Barbara, who can tell me there. I can actually Google it right now, the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and just find out.
So what is your question? Judy Perrin is the webmaster for the Friends website. It's a Friends website.
Yeah, so for example, right now there's a website, brucefreemanrailtrail.org. It says visit the trail. And there's news, there's information. What I would envision, and this is just something that we can suggest as a subcommittee, that there will be a potentially new section. Again, this would be for discussion, that as a multi-town recommendation, a new section called, safety tips, safety awareness. And so if they click the QR code, it could give them more information. And this is where we get into something that I briefly talked about, that I talked about with the state of Massachusetts, having, brief videos. And if you go to any of the rail trails and elsewhere in the United States, some of them do in fact do this. They have like a 2-minute video that, reminds the person on the trail how they respect other people and things like that. So in no way, Barbara, are we suggesting and giving a burden to the Friends? That's not the intention for today. This is merely something that we as a safety subcommittee could recommend to the full committee for discussion, that a QR code could be that way that we connect the user of the rail trail to the website so that they can get more information about safety.
Thank you.
Deborah, if I may, the police department worked with the advisory committee previously to prepare a pamphlet on the rules of the road and safety on a bike and so forth. So that too could be included in your QR code as a link.
Great. That's great. I didn't know that. The other part of your question, Barbara, was about, do we have any comments on the existing, pictures that are part of the memo that came out? And if you scroll, Marsha, you should be able to scroll down and you'll see those pictures. I don't know how well they'll show up.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. So
That's what is existing.
yeah. So we weren't asked to opine. We could. We were specifically asked to opine only on the rules. And then if you scroll, it says, we'll meet again and we'll talk about the pictures. Again, this is my opinion only. How can I be more, I'll try to be definitive. I don't know if these pictures, the pictures are advertisement, but they're not, to me, they don't say anything about safety. So I wouldn't think that these pictures, if they're designed to remind people to do some behavior, I don't know if they're accomplishing that. Except at the bottom where it does say there's the, red X through snowmobiles, ATVs and other motorized vehicles. So my recommendation to the full subcommittee would be that we comment specifically on the wording and then go back to the multi-town and say, we think we should, as you're going to create the signs, please give credence to some of the other signs that we've seen in other towns that are easier to see and they're just easier to understand. If I was a small child, if I had limited abilities, I just don't know if these signs would do it for me. But my recommendation is we simply today give our opinion back to the full committee on the wording and suggest that the multi-towns rethink the pictures. I'd like to hear from Mary Beth and Dorcas and Barbara, of course, you're welcome to comment again.
This is Mary Beth. I feel like those pictures do give information and they do say something about safety. So
Okay.
for instance, I, as a rider, would know that on this trail, I'm going to encounter people who have pets, people in wheelchairs, people who are pedestrian, who are walking, people who are rollerblading.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Oh,
whatever.
yeah.
So that's, to me, that is informational about safety. If I'm one of these, folks that likes to ride those big e-bikes, that's going to tell me that need
that's
to
a
be
really good
careful
point.
about that,
That's a really good
Um,
point.
Yeah, so I feel like the pictures are okay. And I think that the pictures on the bottom, the ones with the, slash through them, the ones in red, say, like no motorcycles, no whatever, the ski mobiles or whatever. I think that's very important too, to have that posted.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Okay, my turn. I like the pictures.
Okay, you like the pictures. All right. Do we think that is there a need to have a picture. So let's go back to the rules. So for example, it says yield to pedestrian, keep right, pass left, give audible signal, do not block trail. Is it important to look for a picture that goes with that or no?
I think there are different ways that people absorb information, and some people are visual and some people read words. And if you have both, it kind of covers it all, you know?
Okay. Okay.
I just want to point out that the icons are intended to point out what uses are allowed and not allowed, not
Yeah.
how the people are supposed to behave who are.
Okay. Okay. I
I
understand
mean,
that.
those
Thank
people
you.
in wheelchairs, I mean, we know they're just wild and crazy, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's pretty uniform with all of the 9
Mhm.
icons. They're not talking about how to use the trail. They're just pointing out who's welcome.
So does it make sense, and it's something to think about, is you have the prohibited ones way at the bottom and they're below the emergency thingy, which I always thought was confusing. It's almost like in an emergency involving these things with the X's or the little slash, maybe you bring those up to the top? You know, just so it's like you have the picture of the 6 squares and have the 3 other squares right below those, and then the rules. I mean, again, however they're going to do this, but that's just one thing. Does that make sense? Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, I'm just
Okay.
think about it. I think that having them together, they got those in an emergency, dial 911 does seem linked to the motorcycle and the
Mhm.
ski mobile or whatever that other thing is. So, and I don't know that they necessarily are. It's not like if you see one of these people, call 911.
Exactly. That's
So
right.
yeah, so it's a little bit confusing in that they look like they're linked, but they're not really. I think it is important to somewhere say in an emergency dial 911, but I
Yes.
don't know that it needs to be over those pictures about what kind of vehicles are prohibited. It's
Okay.
2 different messages.
All right. I am sensitive to time and we have another topic. So I'm going to summarize what I've heard so far, and then we'll open it back up one more time to the public before we end this topic. What I've heard, and I'm going to just summarize it, is that we have agreement that we like the top 4 rules, and we are in favor of having the 4 bigger, periodically, easy to read, and then the other 4, it would be acceptable for those to be, for example, in kiosks, less frequency. And lastly, we are in favor of exploring how to use a QR code, a website URL listing, or whatever mechanism so that more information can be shared in some way about safety, whether that is through the existing Friends website or some other to be established mechanism. That's what I've heard so far.
Deborah, both Mary Beth and Terry Ackerman have their hands raised. I don't know if Mary Beth's is a leftover. Oh, it
Mine's
is a
a
leftover.
mine's a
Okay.
leftover. I'll lower it right now. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right,
So-
Terry, please go ahead. It's nice to see, almost see you.
Okay, let me fix that. Is that better? Okay. So I was at the multi-town meeting and I thought it was excellent. I thought Charlene, I think, was the facilitator, and the group was really productive. And they got a lot done. And I guess I'm a little bit confused now what the process is. I know eventually it's going to come to the select board and then go back to the multi-town committee. And I'm just wondering how much detail this group is supposed to get into, and then does it go to the main Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and then does it go to the traffic safety group or the transportation advisory committee? Who else has to see it before it goes to the select board, et cetera?
I was just thinking that it would be the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee making its recommendation to the select board. If you feel that you want it to go to others, we can probably get input from the traffic management group. They did comment on the flags in the islands, so that they might have some comments, or at least have the public safety officer, Ron Holsinger, take a look at this. I don't know that it needs to go to the Transportation Advisory Committee, but if you want that to happen, we can make that happen as well.
And Marcia, couldn't it be that those groups just go to the full Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee and then make their comments known there, or?
We can invite them, yes. I think this is going to be discussed next Monday at the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee, which is their October, November meeting date.
Okay.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, so on Monday, it's going to be discussed, and they will, of course, look to this subcommittee for a recommendation. I will not be able to be at that meeting because I'll be at the select board meeting at the same time. But then after that, I guess the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee will make a recommendation to the select board.
Correct.
Select board will adopt or whatever, and then it will go back to the multi-town meeting.
Yes.
So what all we're doing now is, as a safety subcommittee, we're getting our thoughts together so that when we attend the full committee, we can let them know, because this is kind of part and parcel of what we're doing. So that's why we're discussing it now, Terry.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Let's see, I don't see any other hands from the public. I think we're ready to make a motion. Mary Beth or Dorcas, do you want to make the motion, or would you like me to? I'm happy to.
Why don't you make the motion?
Okay.
Nice.
So the motion is that, as a safety subcommittee of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee, that we agree that the 4 universal rules, which are on the memo from the multi-town meeting, should in fact be on one sign, which are posted in larger print. And then there will be a separate sign that is posted periodically at trailheads, kiosks, and parking lots that not only has those 4, but the other 4 as well. And that would be on a separate sign. And lastly, that we propose that the use of either a QR code, a URL, or some combination be used once these rules are promulgated, so that the user of the rail trail would not only read the signs, but they would also be able to learn more about them through some to be determined vehicle, whether that is a tab on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Friends website or some other to be determined website.
I raised my hand.
There's a motion on the table. We need a second.
I'll second it.
Am I allowed to make a comment?
Deborah?
Well, sure, we'll just make the motion again then. So go ahead, Barbara.
Well, you've made a motion and you second, now you can discuss. So that's,
Oh, okay.
you just needed the second before you went off in another tangent. So that's all.
Okay, great. So the if we heard a second, then the motion is passed.
No,
No, we didn't vote on it.
you haven't voted yet, but Barbara
sorry.
is asserting something.
Thank you. Thank you for helping me with rules of order. I apologize. Please go ahead, Barbara.
What I would recommend is that you, rather than break this out into 4 and 8 and minor and major rules, if you could just agree to the 8 rules and let the format come next, whether if they're going to, but if your committee could recommend adopting these 8 rules.
The
Just-
only issue, I appreciate that. Mary Beth and Dorcas, your thoughts?
Well, I have no problem with the 8 rules, but I think the formatting is important.
I agree with that statement.
Yeah, I would say I feel the same way. I have no problem with the 8 rules, but I kind of thought from the letter we were asked to comment on that, but I might be wrong. I'd have to look more carefully. But if we weren't, then I would say let's just go with the 8 rules are fine.
Yeah, we
Format-
were asked
format-
to comment on the formatting.
Okay,
But
that's okay.
But I think perhaps, Barbara, we can modify what the motion is. So let me try again, if I may. I move that we agree with all 8 rules. However, we also agree that the first 4 should be larger and posted more clearly than the smaller 4. How that happens, and all of those details we leave to the next step in developing these the proper signage. And then lastly, that we continue to explore a QR code, a URL, so that more information can be available to any user of the rail trail, where they can read more about it. That is the motion now.
Is there a second?
Second the motion.
Okay, any comments from the public? Okay, so now we're going to vote on the motion that has been seconded. Mary Beth Barker,
Aye.
Dorcas Miller,
Aye. All set, aye.
and I on the motion. The motion has now passed. Thank you very much. And I, again, thank you for helping me to follow proper rules. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the input of the public. This is very, very important topic, and it's becoming more important every day. So the next topic is the scope and principles for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Safety Subcommittee. We had a very good discussion last time, which is memorialized in the minutes. And as we discussed that last time, we knew that we were going to be meeting again today. Since our last meeting, there have been several materials that have been promulgated individually that generally talk about safety on rail trails. There have been some comments made that recently there was a question about safety on the rail trail, some cones that an individual was concerned that in fact could lead to something that was unsafe. And all of this to say that this topic continues to be top of mind. And so we were asked as a safety subcommittee to consider how we can and what safety principles we could recommend to the full Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee. And when we think about safety, and I would suggest safety also equates to accessibility. But when we think about safety principles, some things have been coming top of mind. And I'm going to just make some comments that are of my own personal opinion. And again, opening it up to first the members and then to the public. So one of the things that I know we've talked about individually and certainly various members of the public have talked about this, is that safety should focus on the responsibility of the individual as opposed to the technology. One thing that's become abundantly clear is that technology is changing extremely rapidly, and it's very difficult to develop safety principles based on a specific technology. For example, today we're talking about e-bikes. I fully believe that within about a year and a half, you'll be able to retrofit any regular bike and turn it into an e-bike. What are we going to call those? You'll be able to electrify anything you want when the price comes down, and it's simple. We can think about over time how other things were democratized, if you will. So the first principle that I submit is making sure that the safety principles focus on the responsibility of the individual. And for example, last time we talked about courtesy, common sense, and I'm sorry, what was the third one?
Care, common sense, and courtesy.
Right, and you can see those
Caution.
those don't talk about technology. It brings the responsibility to the individual, which I think is very important. So that's really the first one that I think is important. Sorry, I'm just getting back to my notes. Bear with me one second. The second principle, as I was thinking about this, has to do with speed, miles per hour. I do think that we can't avoid that. However, we have to make sure that if we're going to have a speed limit that, similar to the principle we just talked about, it again is about personal accountability, because we're not going to be enforcing it. So whether we have 10, 15, or 18 or whatever miles per hour, we know we're not going to necessarily be able to enforce it. Therefore, it should be something that is easy to read, and that it takes into consideration a reasonableness factor. As we have discussed, there are people that use the trail to get to work. They should be able to go 15 miles an hour. On the other hand, if it's very crowded on the rail trail on a Saturday morning, I don't care what the speed limit is, you should not be going a speed limit that's going to cause danger to others. So the second principle, again, is yes, have a speed limit, but it focuses on the first principle, which is courtesy, care, and common sense. The third principle, and again, I'm interested what you all think about this direction of going, but the third principle is safety has to include a publicized mechanism to raise and resolve safety issues. It was interesting that there were some comments, in single emails from single individuals saying, did you know that there was, either an accident, or did you know that there was a safety problem? How are those publicized on the rail trail? Maybe I'm the only one that doesn't know. But so I think one of our recommendations should be, a principle should be publicize the mechanisms to raise and resolve safety issues on the trail, whatever those are. Maybe they exist. Well, we should make sure that the public knows how to do that, whatever mechanism we use, whether it's an awareness campaign or whatever. I've just got a couple more, so bear with me. The next principle, and this is one that may seem a little bit in left field, but just bear with me. As technology changes, as I see increasing usage of the rail trail, we need to be ready to be flexible. And we may have to make changes, in our town, for example, we don't know, right? And so those may require some infrastructure. Don't know what that's going to look like. Maybe it won't require anything. But I think the principle that I would suggest that we bring forward to the full committee is a principle of adequate oversight and related funding to address rapid changes in technology and environmental issues. And so, for example, and Marcia, you can help me understand, the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee makes recommendations to, you just mentioned the select board, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And,
You're an advisory committee. It's an advisory committee only.
okay, and then where is funding for the rail trail? Like, what committee has that?
No committee has funding,
Mm-hmm.
none whatsoever. It is all within town departments.
Okay. And is there a budget for the rail trail? Maybe that's a question.
There is currently no specific budget set aside. It is the responsibility of the Concord Public Works Department to maintain and repair.
Okay, so I wonder if a principal should say something about the recognition that rapid changes of technology and population may require nimble, the ability to be nimble and therefore have funding. Something that says, it doesn't come out and say that there has to be a budget, but it shows that you have to be ready. Let me just see. Yeah, I know. It's a stretch. I talked about the speed limits, which balance speed, courtesy. We talked about that. And then the last principle that I thought of is, sorry, I just have three more. The next principle is that there should be the principle of steady awareness using a variety of avenues. I think that a principle of ongoing awareness is very important, using, whether it's, newspapers, whether it's, in the kiosk, whether it's, a website that we talked about, and Marcia talked about some options, and then some connections with schools. There are a lot of things, but I think a principle should be steady awareness, given, again, rapid changes. Last principle is of regular interaction. We are finding, that we all got such a lot out of the Friends multi-town meeting. We get such a lot out of Barbara Pike and the Friends just in general, just always learning from them. A principle should be, we regularly interact with other venues such as, but not limited to, the Friends multi-town, Massachusetts DOT, Rails to Trails, to bring current insights to the town and other communities impacted by the trail. That concludes my thoughts on this matter about principles. I don't know if you think this is going in the right direction, but this is what I was thinking about. Let me first open it up. Obviously, Marcia, appreciate your thoughts, but Mary Beth and Dorcas in particular.
I think that I have trouble with some of the language that we're using and kind of mishmashing things together.
Okay.
When I think about principles, I think of principles as just kind of general guidelines, that when we come up, we want people to use courtesy, we want personal responsibility, we want people to, to be respectful of each other. I think of that as principles. But then when I think about making recommendations around speed limits, I think of that as different. I think that as a rule, or so I see it as different from principles. And then when I see it about things like, we want to be, you call it, I think you call it consistent awareness, or I can't remember the word you use, steady awareness. I think of that more as a question of, what do we want our scope to be? Do we want education to be part of our scope? So I'm having trouble with separating out all of these words that we're using. So I think we're mixing up principles with kind of so
no, that makes sense. I
maybe
appreciate
it's just
that.
the way I'm hearing it, but I'm just having trouble. And also, I think we've talked about data collection before, and reporting it, and I think that it takes us down a road that may be out of our scope. So that's, I think, a discussion we need to have.
Okay, no, I really appreciate
All of
that.
that is, this is where I sort of, those are my responses to everything.
Okay, thank you. Before I comment, Dorcas, your thoughts?
I'm just trying to keep it really simple. I really think people are not going to turn into some sort of road warriors when they go on the rail trail. I think most people are willing to go by reasonable rules. I don't think they're gonna get on the internet and study the whole concept of rail trails and all that stuff before they go on the rail trail. You're just gonna hop on your bike and go.
Mhm.
So I think we don't want to get this too complicated. That's my rule. That's my thought.
And so I have two questions. The first would be some of the comments that I made. Would those be then better suited for perhaps that white paper that I mentioned? Maybe those are, ideas or, food for thought or things like that, as opposed to rules.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that we can decide on the things that like, let's decide what do we want to call principles, right? And if it's things like personal responsibility, use respect, blah, 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 that I think we can, so that means that when we come up with rules, we're saying things like what we did, yield to pedestrians. We're not saying things like speeders will be prosecuted, litterers will be prosecuted. We are stating things in a way which is respectful, which is courteous, which, that we're not, so I think that we in general do agree that we want to be that way. We want to be positive. We want to emphasize courtesy, not threaten punishment. Not that we have any way to punish anybody anyway, but so, I don't know if we can agree on that much, but.
Okay. That's really helpful. So in a way, what I'm hearing is that number one, perhaps we have principles. I'm going to use the word principles: courtesy, caution, common sense, personal accountability.
Mhm.
And if I'm restating what you said, as let's pretend that we hadn't met as the multi-town meeting, and let's pretend we had these principles in place, and now we're having this meeting. We'd say, oh, well, let's look at those 4 rules in light of our principles. Let's see how do those 4 line up with courtesy, caution, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So it would be helpful, right? Is there anything that's missing then? If and I'll just restate them. What I'm going from our minutes: courtesy, caution, common sense, personal accountability. Is there any principle that's missing?
I think we need to let them know that we're happy that they're there. I mean, we're happy that they're using the rail trail. We
So
want
welcoming.
them
We
feel
wanna be
welcome, happy, relaxed, and just out to have a really nice day. And rather than making a lot of tough rules and, sort of derogatory remarks and stuff like that, we'll just say, welcome, thank you for coming, that kind of thing. That's what I'd like to see.
So just in the spirit of trying to keep it as a C, I was just thinking, like, what word shows you're welcoming? I like collaborate, but I don't know if that's close enough. I'm just trying to think of a C.
I don't think we need.
Yeah. So welcoming. So a principal should be welcoming.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And welcome to Concord, we're so glad you're here,
Okay.
that kind of
Can we have a principle though that so this whole notion of awareness is very important, because there's so much misinformation. People, and I don't want to get into it, but I got I think I sent all of you some of this very heated messages. Like, some people, think that e-bikes are going to kill people, and look out for those big bad spandex bikers, and so part of me feels that a principle should be awareness. I feel that it is the responsibility to look at things in the light of, how are we doing in educating the public about this? Or does this help educate? Maybe that's a way. So my question is, can we have a principle that is, I don't know, is it communicate or awareness or something like that? We communicate.
Well, I think the things that Mary Beth came up with last week were pretty good. I thought, having the principles of common sense and take care and that kind of thing, those were good principles.
Yeah, I agree. Do we-
And
Mhm.
I think
ahead.
that's what we emphasize, rather than, people are so worried about the e-bikes, but the e-bikes are already there. We're not going to be able to change that. I mean, I would say 30 to 40% now are e-bikes from what I'm seeing. So I think we don't want to punish somebody for having an e-bike. I mean, I have friends my age, when I'm getting up there, who love their e-bikes because now they can go up and down hills, which before they struggled with. So I don't want to punish somebody because they have an e-bike. I don't want to punish somebody because they want to go out for the day. I think it would be nice to say, kind of, welcome to Concord, and then please use, care, courtesy, common sense. Those are nice principles, but I don't want to have pages of rules because nobody's going to
Yeah.
read them.
Right. And so do you, and I think this,
I think maybe a speed limit's a good idea.
Yes, I do too.
and is that a principle though?
No.
No. Okay. So my question, and Mary Beth, you may have an opinion. Like when I say I want a principle to be, we communicate or something like that, is that a principle? Or you're saying, no, that's in the how category. That's not a principle.
Well, I think this is where it gets confusing. I think that as a subcommittee, we are adopting a way that we want to, we're talking about the framework that we want to work from. And I think that that's an internal thing, okay? But then also maybe we want to have a way to communicate that we're asking people to use courtesy, to use caution, to use common sense, and to whatever else, to take
Personal accountability. Yeah.
But right now, we don't have a way to communicate that to the public. So we can say that's sort of the principles we want to work from. This is an internal agreement that we have. This is how we want to work. And then if we want to take on as a subcommittee some way that we want to put out that message, then I think then that's a whole different discussion.
Oh, yes, I get it.
Whether that gets communicated on a sign or in a brochure or whatever, right? So I think that's where it's like, how do we operate as a committee? And then as a committee, beyond the rules, which I think we've done, what are we, what do we
What's our
want to
scope?
communicate?
What's our scope?
Yeah, what's our scope, right?
Okay, got it. That's really helpful. I want to be sensitive to time. Are you guys okay with staying on the line 10 more minutes tops? Are you okay with that?
It's
Just till
about-
6:10?
I'm okay, but I need a bathroom break, so I'll be right back.
Is that, I don't know if we're allowed to have a recording.
If you
Uh,
have to go, you have to go.
15 minutes. And then-
Yeah,
Yeah, so-
I do have another meeting this evening, so I would like to finish up by 6:15.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think we're just about done. As we wait for Mary Beth to come back. So when she gets back, I'll make a motion on the principles. And then in terms of scope, maybe Dorcas, we can, I think our scope is, how we, making recommendations on how we communicate. Maybe that's within our scope, not that we're going to do it, but we're going to make recommendations on how we communicate. And then our scope would be,
Deborah, I think you should
signage.
wait. I think you need to wait for Mary Beth to return.
Yes,
I'm
I'm
sorry.
talking to, oh no, I'm just talking to myself.
It's just easier when everybody hears the same thing.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much. We'll reconvene as soon as she gets back.
Okay, I'm back. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we're going to adjourn shortly. So just in the interest of time, I'll state the principles in a minute or two, but in terms of scope, Mary Beth and Dorcas, so far what I'm hearing is the scope would include, as example, how we communicate the principles, where we would make recommendations on how we want to do that. What would be another example of something that we think is in the scope for safety? Oh, how about this? Recommending speed limits. Would that be another scope?
Well, I think it's key, and I think the whole rail trail, not just Concord, should adopt it.
Yeah.
I think that should probably be in the rules here. Welcome to the trail should be speed limit. There has to be a town, multiple town decision. I can't just make it in Concord.
And
But I
think
well,
it's
one of the
critical.
things that came up in the meeting was that there might be different speed limits for different areas, that some
Yes.
areas that are less congested, or areas that are more congested, it might be more appropriate to have a slower speed limit. So I think that is something that the overall group needs to flesh out a little bit further than.
Agreed.
Yeah. Also, rather than a speed limit, because it's not just different areas, but it's different conditions at different times.
Mhm.
So it's sort of, to me, I think of it as not to exceed X miles per hour, but somehow communicate, but only when, you know,
when, yeah, when conditions
Say-
warrant.
yeah,
It
when
gets back to
conditions,
your,
right.
yeah, it gets
Right.
back to what you said before about common sense.
Yeah, modify speed according to conditions, not to exceed 20 miles per hour. Something, you know, that's too wordy. There must be a better way to say it, but that's
Okay.
kind of.
But I do think this is a multiple town decision and probably.
Yes, it
can't do
is.
this one.
I agree.
Okay.
yeah.
So but I do think it's really important now especially now with the e-bikes coming aboard.
Yeah. So far, and again, in a moment, I'll read. Well, let me just do it now. I'm going to informally read, then we can make a full motion. So far what I have is that the principles include welcoming, courtesy, caution, common sense, personal accountability. And then under scope, we have how we communicate the principles, recommending speed limits and practices, for example, not to exceed based on conditions. Before we have a full motion, anything else under scope or principles?
I think
I think,
the speed limit, I think that, I don't know. I mean, what we can say is part of the scope of the committee is to continue to work with the multi-town committee and advocating for a speed limit, but we can't really decide on that, right? I mean, we don't have any
Right.
authority to make, we can't make a recommendation on that. We can say, we recommend that part of our work is to advocate, you know, continue to work with the multi-town. Does that?
I have one more concern, and that is how to contact emergency services if you have an accident
Yes.
and you don't have a cell phone.
Yeah.
And some of the really big wide open spaces in Concord, they don't so much have them in some of the other towns, but we have some wide open spaces on that rail trail.
Okay.
Should there be a way to contact them, emergency services, if you don't, in those areas? I mean, you don't have to have something with a big wire and all that sort of stuff. You can put up something with a solar cell or something like that,
Yeah.
and a button, I don't know, but it's gotta be
That gets
something
back to
we
your
might
person.
consider.
That gets back to personal accountability. If you're, I mean, we have on the signs already, call 911 in an emergency.
Yep.
And
With a cell phone?
you have to have a cell phone, or somebody else riding by will have a cell phone.
Mhm.
That there's no way we can put in infrastructure like that. Right
Yeah.
now, we're even questioning the use of the flashing beacons because the shade is so dense in those areas that we're not able to keep the batteries operational.
Mhm. Yeah, I think so. But I do think if we talk about scope, you know, a part of the scope is just simply to ask how to contact. Now, we're not saying that we're going to recommend any infrastructure. It could be just saying, listen, we have signage. It tells people, this is what you should do. But then there's the flip, what if you see a safety issue? What if you see an emergency issue? Again, we can talk about, oh, that should go in the kiosk. So I think within our scope is how to contact or how to communicate, emergency procedures or something like that.
I'm seeing, I live near enough the rail trail. I see people at night, 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, riding their bike by themselves. Is this a problem? I mean,
Yeah, I understand. I'm cognizant of time, so I'm going to just say one more time, and then let's see if we're ready for a motion. Principles should include welcoming, courtesy, caution, common sense, personal accountability. The scope in this purview of the safety subcommittee would be how we communicate the principles, recommending continuing to advocate, such as in multi-town meetings, for appropriate speed limits and practices, for example, not to exceed based on conditions. And then lastly, in scope, how to communicate processes for contacting emergency services in the event of safety concerns. I'd like to open it up, including to the public for comments. And then if we have no further comments, we can make a motion.
I have a comment. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know that we're ready to decide some of these things. Like, I think maybe we're still working out what our scope is. I think there's still a lot of questions about who we can recommend people call if they see us. I mean, it doesn't seem like we're ready to do that. I think it is something that we should do. I don't think we can.
Right.
We can finish up this tonight. And I think that also I think we are ready to adopt principles internally that this committee will work on these principles of being welcoming and promoting. But again, I don't know that we are ready to say how we're going to communicate that to the public. I mean, maybe that's something we want to keep working on. So it just.
Right. I wasn't,
yeah.
I'm not saying the how, I'm saying our scope, like it's a premise saying what we're suggesting is what's in scope for the subcommittee is making recommendations how we communicate. Not that we're doing it today.
Okay.
It's just,
Okay.
yes.
That helps. That's clarifying. Okay.
So let me just rephrase. So the scope would be making recommendations for how we communicate the principles, making recommendations for how we advocate, such as in the multi-town meetings, making recommendations for how to communicate. That's what I'm suggesting our scope is, just those three things.
So how we communicate principles, how we advocate for safety, such as a speed limit.
And not to exceed or however you want to. Yeah.
Okay. And how we what was the third one? I'm sorry.
Making recommendations for how we communicate processes for contacting emergency services, whether you see something or you experience something.
Okay. So reporting safety issues.
Exactly. Yeah. And all we're doing is what's in scope is we make recommendations, not that we're doing it now.
Yep. Okay. That helps.
And the only thing that we really don't have in either one of these is, and I know we're just about at time. Let me leave it at that so I can get a motion. Let me make, I'm going to.
I think Dorcas had something to say and Barbara Pike has her hand up.
All righty. And I know we're almost at time. Barbara, go ahead.
I'd just like to point out that in the Friends newsletter, in every edition, we have a little section for, in case of emergency, 911, but otherwise for each town, there is a contact for non-emergency safety issues.
Oh, that's fabulous.
And I assume we have something similar on the website. I haven't looked recently. And I would also encourage the committee to include physical safety, such as Marcia said, well, you know, these beacons are not recharging, so there's an issue there. That's not user behavior, that's physical safety on the trail. Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Mary Beth or Dorcas, did you want to make a motion?
Exactly, which motion are we making at this point?
The motion would be what we believe the principles are. Let's just do that one right now.
Since I didn't write them down, maybe Mary Beth.
I
has to
can,
do
all
that.
right, let me take a crack at making a motion. So I make the motion that the safety subcommittee will, that within our scope is making recommendations on how we communicate our principles to the general public or to users, that we make recommendations on continuing to advocate for safety, such as speed limit and reporting safety issues. We continue to advocate through the multi-town meeting process. And I think those are.
And then if you could just add to your motion something about what the principles are that we discussed.
And that as a committee, we are adopting, working within the framework of personal responsibility, courtesy, respect, or are they? Welcoming, courtesy, personal responsibility, and respect. There's a bunch of other words there. Care and caution. That is.
If that's the motion, I second the motion. Discussion. Open to the public. I see no hands. I'd like now to have a roll call so that the motion that was just read can be approved. Mary Beth Barker,
Aye.
Dorcas Miller.
Aye.
I also approve the motion, and that would be the last topic that we wanted to cover today. I appreciate everybody staying on the line. I'd like to then close by saying that after this meeting, we'll pick another date. I do think we'll need to meet after the next full committee. So I move that this meeting is adjourned.
Second.
Okay.